I'm going to tell you a story. It's a poignant true story of conjoined twins, Daisy and Violet Hilton. They were born February 5th, 1908. Their mom, Kate Skinner, was an unmarried barmaid. They were born in Brighton, England. Kate sold the girls to Mary Hilton. Mary viewed the girls as a commodity. She made a room above the pub she owned, and then she charged people to view them. If they had extra money, she allowed them to touch the space where their bodies were conjoined. In 1911, at the age of 3, she began touring with the girls in Britain. She called them the United Twins. In 1916, she expanded the tours through Germany, Australia, and then into the United States. Originally, the border guards in the U.S. denied them entry, and they declared the girls medically unfit. Mary, motivated by greed, decided to stir up controversy and contacted the local newspapers. In order to avoid a scandal, the authorities eventually let them in. Mary was now free to exhibit the girls in America. In 1926, the legendary comedian Bob Hope heard about the girls. He formed an act called the Dance Mediums, where they did a tap dance routine. When Daisy and Violet were teenagers, the vile, abhorrent Mary Hilton passed away in Birmingham, Alabama. Unfortunately, the girls were bequeathed to Mary's daughter, Edith. Edith and her husband, Meyer Myers, took control of Daisy and Violet's life. In a tragic turn of events, Edith and Meyer turned out to be worse than Mary. They all lived together in a mansion in San Antonio, Texas. Edith and Meyer continued to take Daisy and Violet's money. It was estimated they were earning around $5,000 a week. They had the girls learn jazz music and instruments. Daisy became proficient in the violin, and Violet became skilled at playing the saxophone. The girls worked with several well-known performers: Bob Hope, Charlie Chaplin, and during a performance of one of their now renowned vaudeville shows, Daisy and Violet met the famous Harry Houdini. Harry was a Hungarian-American escape artist and illusionist. He realized the girls were being used, and he set out to change things. The twins were now in their 20s. He showed them newspaper articles and let them realize exactly how much they were worth. He convinced them they needed to change their life. They hired the lawyer Martin Arnold. He helped them win a lawsuit against their captors. They won their freedom. They were awarded $100,000. Nowadays, that would be about $1.5 million. Now they were finally free to do what they wanted on their own without anyone using them. Their new vaudeville show was called the Hilton Sisters Review. They had the freedom to do what they wanted. Daisy even dyed her blonde hair, and they started wearing clothes that didn't match. They spent almost a year in the UK performing. By 1932, the popularity of burlesque and vaudeville shows were waning. Todd Browning was casting around for a new horror film entitled Freaks. They decided to try their hand at film. The sisters were cast as the Siamese twins, and they began filming at the MGM studios. The film became controversial before it was even released. At a test screening, several people ran out of the cinema. F. Scott Fitzgerald, the author of The Great Gatsby, said he was shocked and horrified when he saw the sisters sitting at a table. In 1932, a lot of people reacted unfavorably when they saw Freaks. The film was cut from 90 minutes to 64 minutes. Several countries placed bans on the film. Freaks is still banned in parts of America today. Freaks is considered one of the top 50 cult films of all times. As grown women, Daisy was the first of the sisters to take a lover. Violet said when her sister was busy, she would just turn over, eat an apple, and read a book. Violet was the first to consider marriage with her musician boyfriend, Maurice Lambert. They were turned down by the judge, citing it was immoral. 21 states in total turned them down. Daisy eventually became pregnant. It was rumored that the father was a married man. The twins' agent tried to convince Daisy to get an abortion, which was illegal in those days. Daisy carried the baby to term. She had a son, and she placed him up for adoption. In 1936, the state allowed Violet to get married. It was rumored it was not for love, but for a publicity stunt. She married a gay actor, James Moore. At the wedding ceremony, the guests were charged 25 cents admission fee. The marriage lasted for 10 years, but was eventually annulled. In 1941, it was Daisy's turn to get married. Daisy married Harold Estep, also known as Buddy Sawyer. Buddy was a gay dancer. Their marriage lasted only 10 days. Some thought it was just another publicity stunt. Both the sisters' love lives were complete disasters. Neither of them ever married again. The twins were struggling with their failed relationships and marriages. They were also struggling with their careers. Since their careers were all but dried up and they were struggling financially, the twins decided to buy themselves a hot dog stand. The other vendors did not like the idea of competing with conjoined twins, but they didn't have to worry long. The sisters were soon out of business. Their career was brief and unsuccessful. By 1951, they were broke once again. Their hot dog business failed miserably. They were desperate to make ends meet. Fortunately for them, later that year, some work did come along for the sisters. They were offered a starring role in a film, Chained for Life. It was directed by Harry L. Fraser and written by Ross Frisco. They were once again billed as the Siamese twins. They shared the spotlight with several other vaudeville acts of the past. Despite the fact that Chained for Life had a negative response and poor ratings, Daisy and Violet were determined to promote the film. They were hoping to make some money out of it. The sisters began to appear at screenings for both Freaks and Chained for Life. They managed to earn a little money for their time and effort. The tour wasn't as successful as the sisters had hoped. Unfortunately, the little money wasn't enough to keep them out of the red. They needed to find a way to earn more money. In 1961, their manager was with them at an appearance they made at a drive-in theater in Charlotte, North Carolina. At the end of that appearance, they went looking for their manager. He went missing. They couldn't find him anywhere. It turned out the manager left mid-show. He decided they weren't making enough money and it wasn't worth his time. The sisters knew they had to find a way to make some money. They looked everywhere. Eventually, they got jobs working as cashiers at a local grocery store. At first, Charles Reed, the owner of the store, was scared half to death of the sisters. When the sisters came into the store, they were filthy. At the time, Reed didn't know who Daisy and Violet were. He didn't know about the history, how they were displayed as freaks before they were even old enough to go to school. Reed prayed about the sisters and what he should do to help them. He gave them a job. He paid them both. He found them a house. And he showed them a church. He built a special counter for the sisters so they could work side by side in privacy and comfort. None of the customers knew they were conjoined twins. The rest of their lives were spent quietly in Charlotte. Only a few close friends and co-workers knew they were there and that they were Siamese twins. In 1968, a terrible case of influenza swept through the United States. It was also known as the Hong Kong flu. By Christmas time, both the sisters had the flu. They became very ill. In January of 1969, they failed to show up for work at the grocery store. Their employer became very concerned and he sent the authorities to check on them. They had to break in the door and they discovered Violet and Daisy's bodies. It looked like they had been dead for a few days. The worst part was that the coroners were convinced that Daisy had died first, and Violet had survived for a few days before she passed as well. There are 2 musicals based on the sisters' lives, 20 Fingers, 20 Toes. It was released in 1989, and Sideshow was released in 1997. There's also a documentary called Bound by Flesh. It was released in 2012. They were 60 years old when they passed. In Brighton, they named a streetcar after them, and they have the 18 Riley Road Blue plaque.